welcome to Hear These Words, a podcast and video series from Good Shepherd Episcopal Church in sunny Tequesta, Florida. I'm Sanford Groff.
And I am Jim Cook.
And every week on the podcast, we take a look at the readings assigned to us for the upcoming Sunday from the Revised Common Lectionary. We're on Proper 13a for August 2nd, and we're track 1. The words we hear are Matthew 14, 13 through 21. That's the feeding of the 5,000. Genesis 32, 22 through 31. We continue with Jacob. Portions of Psalm 17, and then continuing in Romans 9, 1 through 5. Father Cook, good morning.
Good morning.
We're back in our old stomping grounds here.
We are.
If you're listening, you can't see us, but we're in the barn. Normally we're in the church, but the church is having its roof ripped off right now.
Which is great. It's great news.
It's
you
great
were hoping
news.
On Sunday morning, you were hoping they'd be here Tuesday, and
hoping,
here they are.
And here it is Tuesday morning, and they are ripping the part of the roof directly above where we normally sit. So it's quite loud in there.
Great. It's great.
It's very exciting.
It's exciting. It sure is, yeah.
The north parking lot is kind of closed off for the time being, so if you come to visit, just careful driving.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
It is exciting.
Everything going well?
Mm-hmm. We're doing well.
Good.
Yes.
Good.
Can't complain.
We are also well. Well as well can be.
That's good.
It's good. The summer, I will say the summer goes by pretty quickly. And to think that it's, August 2nd already, and school starts, in about 2 weeks from today.
Teachers are probably coming back.
Teachers come back next week. So
yeah, it's really fast.
It goes by quickly.
It does.
And we're trying to plan for the program year, and we're moving along.
Yeah.
So we'll be good. We'll be ready to go.
God will get you there.
God always gets you there.
Yeah.
Or wherever you don't get, that's okay too.
Yeah.
Okay. Matthew 14, 13 through 21. It starts off by talking about how Jesus withdrew in a boat to a deserted place by himself, but then the crowds hear about where he is and they follow on foot from the towns, so that by the time he gets on shore, he sees this massive crowd and he has compassion for them and cured their sick. Eventually, evening comes, and the disciples are the ones who kind of start thinking a little bit more pragmatically. Hey, this is it's getting late. Like, no one's had any food. Let's get these guys out of here to go back home and eat. And Jesus basically says, they don't need to go anywhere. Why don't you guys give them something to eat?
Yeah.
We don't have anything but these loaves and fish. And so Jesus says, bring them here. He orders the crowd to sit. He takes the loaves and fish, looks up to heaven, blesses them, breaks them, and gives them to the disciples. And they fed the crowds. All ate and were filled. They took up their broken pieces, 12 baskets full, and those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. So probably double that number,
right? If
you're looking at a numbers game.
I'm sure.
Yeah, feeding of the 5,000 is a big crowd.
And the feeding of the 5,000, of course, is obviously a pretty important story, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's in all four Gospels.
Right.
And most stories are not in all four, right? And so that's important. Then you have the feeding the 4,000, which is in John and Luke maybe.
Yeah.
And so obviously those feeding stories mean something pretty significant in the telling of the story of God's grace.
Right.
And redemption.
Yes. Yeah.
Provision.
Right.
A lot of different ways.
Abundance.
Right. Yeah, it's great. And it also resonates back with other feeding stories that come to us in the Hebrew Scriptures, right? The feeding of the manna in the wilderness, right? And the prophet Elisha feeds a large crowd as well,
right? And
so there's all these stories around food and being fed,
right,
that are consistent,
right. It makes sense then, as the church has matured, that one of the things that we tend to do well is feeding, right?
Yeah.
We have our food pantry here. We participate at St. George Table down at Riviera Beach for a hot meal. Most churches have some sort of feeding ministry attached to them. And
of course, we have the Eucharist every meal, right? And then even the feeding. Just think of the meals that are fed here at Good Shepherd, in the parish hall, right? Yeah. And they're usually meals. Almost always a meal ends up being somewhat celebratory, even if it's the meal following a funeral, that's there to remind us of, I think, the goodness and graciousness of God and community, and God working with people, always, right. Yep. I think, it's good.
This week's readings, this kind of, at least the Old Testament and this one, are going to invite a couple of questions for us, and I think one of the questions will be around how, the mechanics of certain things. And this one certainly invites that question. Yes. And so people have wrestled with, how did this happen? What was the mechanics of the miracle, if you will? How did these limited resources turn into an abundance of resources? And there are different ways that you can kind of skin the cat on that one, pardon the expression. Yep. I'm a miracle guy, so I kind of run with that under Jesus's hand, these things multiplied. The author, Matthew, does not fixate on that. Actually, none of the Gospels will fixate on. As Jesus tore the bread, more bread appeared in his hand. It grew, it grew on his fingers or something. I mean, miracles rarely have that level of detail. I'm kind of thinking of the blind man and the mud in his eyes, So often the details that are provided tend to be more symbolic. They tend not to be scientific the way we would hope.
Right.
So what that has caused in the history of interpretation of passages like this, including from the co-chair of my commission on ministry in Maryland when I was there, a lay person, he preached a sermon about this at the school I worked at, and his take was, this was not a miracle in the proper sense. It was a miracle in that it inspired this generosity for people who had a bag of, I've got a couple things in my purse, to kind of pull that out and then to share it with their neighbors, right? That was his...
Think how much is among us.
How much is among us. We all
just open ourselves up and we can kind of feed each other. That's a kind of a Parker Palmer thing as well. Like he's written about that. Like when you're on an airplane and all of a sudden, they run some of you somewhere and everyone goes and digs around.
Digs in their bags.
There's plenty of food for everyone.
Pull the carry-on down, get the snack bag out, and there's plenty of... And I think that's a fine... I mean, I don't think that's a bad... obviously, that's how we do fundraising. It's how we do... Most all of our church life is done through that kind of mechanism. Right. We're not relying on divine miracles in the formal sense to provide for the needs of the church and our ministry. That said, I don't think the text here allows us to go that far. It doesn't.
I would agree with that.
It doesn't really let us go. It doesn't really let us, go to that. I mean, he says to the disciples, "You feed them," and then he takes the bread. He looks up to heaven, he blesses them, he breaks them, he gives them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. It doesn't say...
The disciples went to the crowds.
The crowds, and the crowds started kind of sharing their food.
No,
right.
It does not.
So I tend to stay a little closer to the text when it comes to the actual story, even though I think our modern day... I think we can look at this with a modern day lens of abundance and how much we are able to bring together. And that is in itself its own kind of divine miracle because it's an inspiration, right, for us to do that work.
Yeah. But I do think that if we're going to try to explain it, like you just suggested, then how do you explain the Eucharist, right? Mm-hmm. Which, I'm sorry, I do believe that we're eating the body and blood of Christ.
Right.
That is what we sacramentally believe.
Yes.
And we're not sitting here trying to figure out how and when all that happens.
The mechanism.
The mechanisms and all that, right? Faith requires us to kind of believe in those things we cannot see.
Right.
And I think if you take that miracle of feeding the 5,000, for example, and begin to look and examine your own life. Mm-hmm. There's things that happen in all of our lives that we really cannot explain. I mean, surgeons will say that in a surgical setting, that person should not be alive. Right? Mm-hmm. And I think if we just give in to the possibilities that God's grace and God's work within our lives cannot always be explained.
Right.
We're liberated from that
Yes.
And we're actually transformed in new ways.
To be receptive to the miracle.
The miracle.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do.
It's great.
It is great.
Well, I think the pattern here, right? The pattern is the crowds came out of nowhere. Like
right.
Jesus wasn't like, hey, we're going to gather at 2:00 in the afternoon. No, the crowds followed him.
Yep.
So he kind of finds himself in a situation, as we all find ourselves in situations, overwhelmed with the responsibility of that situation. Mm-hmm. And there are going to be voices, whether it's in our head or whether it's other people in our lives who are saying, you know what, this is too overwhelming. We cannot do this. We cannot handle this amount of whatever it is, right? Abundance or responsibility, or however you want to, in your own life, kind of skin that. So let's just call it quits. Like, we're done. We did kind of what we could do, but let's be done.
Yeah.
And God's invitation is, but there might be something more, there might be actually something more in this that we need to be open to. Right. And so, and that openness doesn't take us on our responsibility off the hook. Jesus says, you feed them.
Yeah.
It actually gives us more responsibility, but it provides the resources and the provisions to do that work.
Yeah.
And so then you take that next step in faith, which really, that's the faith step, right? It's the step when all signs point to you're done, it's too much, you're overwhelmed, you're kind of exhausted, and there's that next step in faith that's like, but I feel like God is calling us to do this one more thing that requires me to actually do it.
Right.
It requires me to maybe sacrifice a little bit. And yet by doing that, all of a sudden there's this kind of overwhelming thing that happens that even supersedes the thing that came before.
Yes.
The fact that the crowds gathered, it's the feeding of the 5,000. It's not the gathering of the crowds without invitation.
Right.
Like it.
But
I think that pattern's I think that's a human pattern that God divinely inspires even today.
Right. It kind of takes the anxiety that we feel and transforms the anxiety into an act of grace.
Right.
God is never the anxious one. Do you know what I mean? God is never the one get all flitting around going, what am I going to do to feed these people? It's always the disciples, it's us, right? Yes. Oh, what are we going to do? What are we going to do?
Right.
It then transforms, even at the very beginning, it's like a miracle upon miracle that we're sitting here today, thousands of years later, talking about this. Because we also maybe have not sat in a field listening to Jesus talking and been fed that night with bread and fish, but we've got other hillside miracles in our lives if we open ourselves up to that reality. Right. But we're so quick to overlook that or forget it. Oh, at one time I was really angry, blah, 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 and I can't remember it anymore. Do you know what I mean? Seriously. Yeah. I can remember like maybe one or two things in my whole life, but that's just that's why these stories are collective memories of the whole. Right. And I need the whole to remind me in my anxiety of what's happened in the past, because I can't remember in my own life.
Yes.
It's great.
Great.
That's why we need to be parts of communities. We need to keep telling the story over and over again to remind ourselves.
How quickly we forget on our own.
Because when we're anxious and we're upset, everything falls apart. Like we can't remember anything. I can't even remember, you take an exam and you can't even remember the most basic thing that you studied because you're so nervous about taking the exam. You can't remember. Yeah. Right? It's kind of the basic stuff, I think. And
that amnesia, the anxiety amnesia is actually kind of a gift we don't remember. But then you end up at the next crossroads of where that anxiety rears its head again, and you're just like, wait, what do I do now? And it's like, but I've been at this crossroads before.
It's gonna be okay,
And you're surrounded by people, and you're telling the story of Jesus, who's at that crossroads, and it's like, we all are the disciples at some level, just wanting to call it quits because it's just too much. Yeah, it's too much.
It is.
But not for God.
But not for God.
No.
God is always the calm voice, in the middle of all of it.
That's right.
Good. Oh man, I've gotten you this far, people. I'm going to get you this. Okay, here we go.
Keep going. Speaking of continuing to go, let's move to Genesis. Do you have anything else you want to say about the gospel?
No,
great.
We're good.
We continue with Jacob. Now, at the end...
I do want to say one more thing. Yes. I thought about this. I was looking something up yesterday. This feeding story follows the story of Herod's birthday. Another, not another necessarily feeding story, but a story of where Herod is celebrating his birthday. This is when he, demands the head of John the Baptist. They're in the palace.
Yeah.
It's always, among the beauty and the grandeur of where power lies. And then Matthew immediately goes into this story. And I think there's some genius about where the stories follow the stories of being fed and what goes on in that birthday party, the celebratory party, and then what goes on with Jesus out on the hillside with folks who have nothing, and tells us how God provides for them. I do think there's some juxtaposition there that is of interest.
Very interesting.
So I would encourage, go back to Matthew, to the what is it? Matthew 14, the first
12 verses.
Yeah. Take a look at that.
Yeah. Just very interesting.
Just feed it there. All right, I'm done.
Good. Maybe I'll pick up on that on Sunday. We'll see.
Yeah,
very interesting. All right. Genesis picks up with Jacob where we left off, and we left off with Jacob and his kind of Uncle Laban, tricking him about his daughters, and trying to get his first daughter married off first, and then anyway, we'd have to go back. But it turns out that he ends up marrying both of them.
I guess you put 7 years in both, and
you get both. If you get caught up on that,
he's got two maids.
Yes,
that are also part of the story.
Jacob got up, took his 2 wives, his 2 maids, his 11 children, and crossed the ford.
And the 11 children are not all by one of the wives; they're by all 4.
Right.
If you're looking, we were laughing about this earlier. If you're looking to Scripture to give you great, perfect guidance onto sort of marriage and family life, and you're completely committed to one thing, just always be careful a little bit.
Yeah, because scriptures have a lot of different takes.
So many different takes.
It's not as clean cut as we
not at all
have been told recently.
Right.
Yeah. In Christianity. So there you go. I don't know what to say about the multiple wives except that
we're going to move on.
We're going to move on. Let's go. This is the story of Jacob wrestling God, or kind of the figure in the night. And so it says that he kind of sent them on, and Jacob was left alone, and then this man wrestles with him until daybreak.
Right.
And as they're wrestling, Jacob kind of begins to take the upper hand in this wrestling match in the middle of the night. And the man says, let me go, for the day is breaking, right? So there's something about how the sun coming up, this experience is not something that can continue into the daytime with this figure, right, who ends up being God. But Jacob says, I will not let you go unless you bless me. And so the mysterious man says, what's your name? He says, Jacob. And the man renames him. You shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with humans and have prevailed. And, Jacob kind of asks for his name, and I don't think he ever gets it. But he gets blessed, and he calls the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and yet my life was preserved. The sun rose upon him as he passed Peniel, limping because of his hip. So he did have this one injury where he struck him on his hip socket, so his hip ends up limping. Probably the rest of the days.
The rest of his life, right? And it's kind of carries this, that I've struggled with God. Right. I've sort of been wounded in that at some level, right? As a reminder for Jacob the rest of his life. Who really knows? But there's definitely a lot of, we all kind of know that story. It's like Jacob's ladder. Yeah. So we know the kind of story. We don't really know the context and all that, right? So and I think the wrestling, knowing another's name is a way of maintaining control over somebody. So I think Jacob kind of wants to know who this guy's name is because he knows Jacob's name, and if I know your name, I somehow gives me
leg up,
like a leg up,
yep.
So to speak. But it's again the story of Jacob is so interesting how God takes somebody who's actually not the kind of the greatest moral character,
He stole his birthright from his brother.
Yeah. Just a kind of a little bit of a shyster.
Yes. Yep.
But God sticks with him, and still kind of trusts Jacob to do what's going to be right in God's eyes. Mm-hmm. So that's also a place to kind of catch yourself a little bit when you want to go around judging others who may not be as morally upright.
Right.
Is it possible
for God to actually use those people? Yeah. What's interesting about how this passage, and for frankly, much of the Bible is written not in the modern writing has a lot of interiority, meaning that there's a lot of and he felt this way, and he did this, and he was feeling that. There's a lot of how do people and characters feel in these stories? We really get very, very little of that.
The kind of generally out of which these stories are told didn't do that.
That's not how they wrote. It wasn't how they thought. Right.
That's asking way too much of these stories.
Right.
They're not. That's not what they did, and I don't think they. Because of that, I'm not sure they cared that much about it. We're very much involved in what's really going on with you. Talk to me about that. Share your story as a child or whatever.
Right.
No.
But I think what's interesting, but based on the text, alone, if you wanted to read a little bit into that, right? Where's Jacob's mind in this?
Yeah.
He's kind of wrestling with God, and he ends up kind of with the upper hand, and he could have just let him go, right? He could have let this figure let God go, but I just wonder if Jacob's own actions and here he's he tricked his brother. He hears the promise again, with his ladder. Then Laban kind of is deceitful to him, and so he kind of when the shoe's on the other foot, it's not as nice, right, buddy? So now he's kind of walking with this, and it's many years later. He's got 11 children, so it's been some time for him to think about things. And I just wonder if at this point he's kind of looking back and he feels the need to be blessed. Even though the promise of his family, there's no change in that, right? Mm-hmm. His grandfather, his father, all told him about the promise. He saw. God kind of told him with Jacob's ladder directly. He's got the children now, and yet for some reason, Jacob still has this need, kind of whether it's psychologically or emotionally or spiritually, or what it is, but to have this figure bless him, even as he's kind of simultaneously wanting to get the upper hand by getting his name.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
it's still a struggle.
Yeah,
right?
Jacob's personality is still right front and center. I'm going to try to...
But remember that the night of this dream, Jacob is alone.
Right.
He has come into Canaan to try to reconcile with his brother Esau. Mm-hmm. And Esau is not having it. Mm-hmm. And word has gotten out that Esau and a bunch of 400 people are out looking for Jacob to kill him. Mm-hmm. And Jacob sends his family kind of away, and he stays in the desert alone that night before this all happens. Mm-hmm. So Jacob is scared.
Yes.
At some level. Mm-hmm. And then has this dream. Mm-hmm. And so is it God's way of saying, don't be afraid? Is it kind of like what we just talked about in the feeding the 5,000, where the disciples are what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Send them away. They're hungry. Mm-hmm. And Jesus is like, give me the food. We're going to do something about this.
Right.
And is it sort of in that, is that how this two fit together. You're preaching this weekend, so you can try to. We're supposed to fit all these together in our preaching on a Sunday morning. You think our sermons are long now? Could you imagine if we preached about each one of these readings and then tried to tie them into a neat bow?
Yeah,
it's just not. You can't do it.
Yeah, it's pretty hard.
But anyways, it's also interesting to go back and go, what's the context of which this story is being told? And it does kind of, I think, something really to do with. That the fact that Jacob right now, like retribution's kind of coming for you, buddy.
Right.
The brother Esau's not really interested in hearing his reconciliation.
Right. It's been years.
It's been years.
It's been years of planning and plotting.
Yeah. Right. So, anyways, if that helps or hinders, I don't know.
No, I think it's very helpful, and I think it gives us more context for why he would need the blessing.
Yes.
Yeah. And then that limp, right? The limp, and it's always interesting to see in the scripture where the wounds show up.
Yeah.
And, kind of why they're there, and wounds in scripture are not points of weakness. They're typically telling part of the story.
They are.
Of in this case, striving with God, and prevailing. In other cases, you've got Thomas and Jesus's wounds. You've got Paul and his kind of thing. Moses doesn't speak very well, so he's got to have Aaron with him. So, there are lots of different examples of wounds or kind of shortcomings that God uses. Yeah.
Right?
So,
works through.
Yeah. I think it's helpful for us when we've got wounds to kind of think about them and kind of how we think about our scars. Your sermon talked a little bit about that.
A little bit about that. I mean,
how the scars, the little speck in the oyster, kind of becomes the pearl.
Becomes the very pearl.
Yeah,
and also, like even if you have friends or people, maybe you, or someone in your family like who really battles serious illness, a cancer or something. People will describe how that cancer has actually brought them closer to God because they have depended on God in new ways. You know what I mean? And that wound that could actually end up taking their lives at the same time is enriching their lives in ways they had not done before. Right. And so we both, as clergy, you have these opportunities to hear stories from people that just, it sounds like that seems so impossible, with someone who at this point, knocking on wood, has yet to have sort of a life-threatening illness that day for all of us is coming, right? Yeah. But to hear people to that witness is pretty powerful.
Yeah, it is.
As they walk with their wound and are made whole, right? Yeah. By our wounds we shall be made whole.
Psalm 17, we'll take a look at that on Sunday. Romans 9, we're going to keep moving. Got to keep moving. It's a short one, five verses, Romans 9, 1 through 5. Paul, I am speaking the truth in Christ. I have great sorrow and unceasing anguish in my heart. For I wish that I was accursed and cut off from Christ for the sake of my people, my kindred. They are Israelites, and to them belong the adoption, the glory, the covenant, the giving of the law, the worship, the promises. To them belong the patriarchs, and from them, according to the flesh, comes the Messiah, who is over all, God blessed forever. Amen. Paul is just desiring that his fellow Israelites, fellow kind of Jewish people, are part of the family, part of that kind of
would embrace Jesus as the Messiah,
the Christian group, right?
Yeah,
and I think he's finding himself of great sorrow. His words, unceasing anguish, and just that is not the case. That there are factions of people that either don't know or won't, or reject Christ in a particular way, and he feels this kind of overwhelming sense of desire to have them as part of the followers of Jesus.
Yeah. But he doesn't condemn them.
No. And this is coming.
That's the thing that we just take that and then we just keep going with it until eventually we're all like, he just laments.
It's a lament.
you know,
you need to
that
keep
his
it in
own
that
people don't.
register.
They're already adopted. They've got the covenants. They're all in it. They're all. Don't you see that this is the long-awaited Messiah that's part of what we've all longed for?
Right.
But he's not condemning them. He's not saying the covenants no longer exist for you because you don't believe. And again, we as human beings are so, it seems so easily wanting to make sure that I know I'm okay, which means you can't be in it. Like if I'm secure, somebody's got to be out.
Right.
And that is just not what I read in Scripture and what I hear coming from those who've come before us.
Right.
I wish we just were all more gracious.
Yes. I think Paul's being very gracious here.
I do too.
You know,
I do too. And I feel bad. You know, you just, it's like, I wish more people followed, or, you know, I guess had the faith that I have within me, because I know what it does for me. But you know what? God is God, and it's going to be okay. God is God of everybody.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think on a Sunday morning when you're heading home from church and you drive by the athletic fields and they're filled with families and
it's
kids.
The same kind of feeling.
Just don't try not to shake your fist too much. You know, it's okay to lament, but you know, everyone's walking a journey that I think God is constantly trying to find us on, and it doesn't mean that we need to go and, you know, yell out the window.
We don't. It's not gonna help.
That doesn't help. All right. Anything else for the good of the order?
I don't think so.
I think
all has been said and done.
All is said. Nothing more to say. Well, we thank you for joining us. If you've made it this far, congratulations to you. We look forward to worshiping with you on Sunday, in person, online, around the world, wherever you are. And we thank you. Give us a like or a comment if you'd like. And now we hope you feel a little more prepared to hear these words. We'll see you soon.
Bye.